For decades, Dick Van Dijk's timeless talent, resilience, and charm have brought joy and inspiration to millions of people. From his unforgettable performances to his amazing personal journey, he has consistently defied expectations. But now, something truly extraordinary has occurred, an event so significant that it's forcing the legendary entertainer to say goodbye in a way that no one could have imagined. Let's take a closer look, but before we get to the big reveal, let's look back at the events that led to this important moment. Younger brother Jerry and Dick Van Dijk grew up in a simple but loving home. Their dad used to be a baseball player and musician, but switched jobs as a salesman after Dick was born, and their mom was a secretary. Life wasn't easy, especially during the Great Depression, but his family always managed to get by. They weren't rich, but they had enough, and his parents weren't too strict about things like... During schoolwork, Dick often said that his funny parents helped him develop his sense of humor. He grew up in Danville, Illinois, a quiet, close-knit town that he called the perfect little American community. The neighbors were friendly, and trouble seemed to be a long way away. Dick had a good relationship with his parents, but one story from his childhood still stands out. On his 18th birthday, his mom told him he was already 18, but the date didn't add up. It turned out they had lied about. His mom said he was born early because of complications, so they changed the date. Curious, Dick asked his grandmother, and she told him the truth. His parents had gotten pregnant before they were married in the 1920s. This was a big scandal, and changing the date was their way of hiding it. His mom later confirmed the story, and while it was shocking for Dick to learn he was a love child, it didn't change how he felt about his parents or his upbringing. Soon after finding out his real age, During World War II, he was eager to serve and even dropped out of high school to join the Army. But when he learned that he might become a tail gunner on a B-24 bomber, a dangerous job with a lot of deaths, he decided it wasn't for him. Instead, he joined a group that entertained the troops, a role that seemed more fitting for him because he loved performing. In high school, he was in choir and the drama club, which helped him prepare for his new role. After the war, he went back home and became involved in entertainment. He never went back to finish high school, but at age 78, he finally got his diploma. Dick Van Dijk was born to make people laugh. As a child in Illinois, he was surrounded by talented performers like Donald O'Connor, who would go on to become a Hollywood star. But acting wasn't always the plan. Coming from a religious family, Dick thought he might become a minister. That changed when he joined the school's drama club and fell in love with performing. He did a few school musicals and even landed a part in... At age 20, he started dating Margie Willett, a girl from his hometown. They wanted to get married but didn't have the money, until a radio producer for the show Bride and Groom offered to pay for their wedding and honeymoon if they got married on air. So, in 1948, with 15 million listeners tuning in, after their wedding, Margie had a miscarriage, but the couple got back together and hit the road. As Dick's career took off, Margie stayed behind the scenes. She was a free-spirited artist with short hair and little makeup who didn't want to be in the spotlight, while Dick became famous with his show, The Dick Van Dijk Show. But what if we told you Johnny Carson could have been Rob Petrie instead? You can't imagine the Dick Van Dijk Show without its famous star, but here's the twist. He wasn't always supposed to play the lead. It all began with Carl Reiner's idea for a sitcom about a young married couple where one of them worked on a TV show. Reiner was originally going to play Rob Petrie himself. CBS liked the idea and even approved the pilot, but they didn't want Reiner to be the lead. They thought the show needed a different face at the helm. Reiner's Jewishness may have been a factor in the network's reluctance, but either way, the search began for a new Rob Petrie. It's hard to believe, but Johnny Carson, who would go on to become a late-night legend, was one of the final contenders. It came down to Carson and Dick Van Dijk, who got the part thanks to his success on Broadway in Bye Bye Birdie. The chemistry between Dick Van Dijk and Mary Tyler Moore was one of the show's highlights, making them the perfect TV couple. Surprisingly, Dick didn't want Mary on the show at first because he thought she was too young. She was 11 years younger than him. But Carl Reiner believed in her and cast her anyway, ignoring any concerns about the age gap. Reiner was right. Audiences never noticed or cared that Dick was so nervous before filming the pilot that he lost 5 pounds in a week and got fever blisters. If you look closely, you can see one on his lip, which Carl Reiner later called one of the most forgettable moments during the show. President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963. The cast was practicing a scene for Richie Pett's birthday party while kids ran around the set. When the news came in, everyone stopped in stunned silence and gathered around a radio to listen to it. Carl Reiner, realizing the weight of the moment, sent everyone home for the day. Even though it was brilliant, the Dick Van Dyke Show didn't have an easy start. It was different, smart, funny, and even a little brave for its time. Procter & Gamble, one of the show's biggest advertisers, wouldn't let it happen. They loved the show so much that they threatened to pull their ads if CBS canceled it. CBS gave in and moved the show to a better time slot. Suddenly, the ratings went through the roof. The show became a huge hit and could have gone on for years, but the cast and crew decided to end it after 5 seasons while they were still on top. Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore were... 5 years later, CBS wanted to bring Dick Van DJK back to TV. The late 1960s had seen big changes in culture like the hippie movement and the rise of color TV, and they were willing to do whatever he wanted. Van DJK got a guaranteed 3-year run for the new Dick Van DJK show, which meant that CBS couldn't cancel it early without paying him a lot of money. He also insisted on filming in Carefree, Arizona, where he lived, and CBS agreed. Although the show started off strong, ratings eventually dropped and it ended after. Van Dyke's return to TV was marked by 3 seasons of still. Unlike stars like George Clooney or Bruce Willis, Dick Van Dyke never quite made the transition from TV star to movie superstar. During the 1960s and 1970s, Hollywood tried casting him in a number of comedies and children's films, but most didn't do well with audiences. He was in Disney's Robin Crusoe, a comedy in the style of Buster Keaton, and even a movie about a whole town trying to quit smoking. His performance in the drama The Morning After won him an Emmy, but for many viewers, he will always be known as Rob Petrie, the charming, funny, and unforgettable star of the Dick Van DJK Show. But behind that charm was a man quietly torn between 2 lives. In 1975, Dick Van DJK started dating Michelle Triola, his agent secretary, while he was still married to Margie Willett. Unlike Margie, Michelle knew about Hollywood life and seemed to connect with Dick in a way. In his autobiography, Dick admitted that he would call his agent just to talk to Michelle. What began as casual lunches turned into secret dinners in dimly lit restaurants where no one would notice. Living a double life became so stressful for Dick that he joked that keeping 2 relationships going at the same time was harder than working on his TV show. The stress made him lose weight. Eventually, he and Marge agreed to live separate lives, even though they stayed married for many years. He lived with Michelle for decades, but they never got married because she never set a wedding date. The next year, Dick started a new variety show called Van DJK and Company. It got off to a good start and even won an Emmy over Saturday Night Live and The Muppet Show, but it only lasted 1 season. He then joined Carol Burnett's show, but things didn't go as planned. Carol Burnett had asked Dick to fill in for Harvey Korman, but the writers didn't like his style. We're still making jokes for Harvey, which made things awkward. Dick eventually quit the show, and Carol understood. She later wrote that they had hoped to make a great comedy duo, but the chemist just wasn't there. In 1988, Dick tried another sitcom with his son Barry, but it only lasted a few episodes. 5 years later, he found lasting success on Diagnosis Murder, where he played a doctor who solved crimes. The show was a hit with older audiences and ran for 8 years. Unfortunately, Dick's first wife, Margie, died of cancer in 2008, even though they had been divorced for years. He wrote that her death felt like losing a part of himself. The next year, Michelle Triola also died, which was very painful for him. When he thought about Tri's illness, he remembered trying to stay positive for her, and even acting like he didn't know how serious it was when she asked. He called it the hardest acting he'd ever done. He eventually found love again with Arlene Silver, a makeup artist he met at the 2006 SAG Awards. He was drawn to her beautiful eyes, while Arlene said she didn't recognize him as a performer at first. As a person, they became close after Dick's loss of Michelle, with Arlene often bringing him food after work. He fell in love with her kindness and support even though they were 46 years apart in age. They got married on February 29, 2012, and Dick said their relationship was one of the best decisions he had ever made. On their first wedding anniversary, he said that married life was amazing and credited Arlene with keeping him happy and young. The couple shares a playful dynamic. Arlene often dances around the kitchen while doing chores, and Dick says it's impossible to be sad in their home when there's always singing and dancing. When they're not traveling, they work on a TV show about their life together. At first, it was mostly about Their love story became famous as proof that love knows no age limits, but just when things seemed to be getting better, life threw Dick another curveball. In August 2013, Dick Van Dyke posted a picture of his completely destroyed Jaguar on Twitter with the caption, "Jag for sale, real cheap." Wasn't a joke. He was driving on a California highway when his car suddenly caught fire. Luckily, he was able to escape, but he needed help getting out of the burning car. TMZ was there to report on the story. The first to report the accident, saying that the car was already on fire when he was rescued. True to form, Dick was able to make the scary situation funny with his tweet. At the same time, he had been dealing with another serious problem for 7 years. He had a mysterious neurological problem that made his head sound like it was beating every time he laid down. He was so tired that no doctor could figure out what was causing it, so he turned to Twitter for help, asking if anyone knew the answer. After a few weeks, he found out that the noise and pain were coming from his dental implants. Once the problem was fixed, Dick Van Dyke's sense of humor and charm have always been a part of his public image. However, he had personal problems that he kept hidden for many years. In the 1960S and 1970S, when celebrity lives weren't as public, he was able to hide his drinking problem. On Oprah's show in 2016, he admitted that he started drinking to deal with his shyness and feel more at ease. Over time, drinking became a problem. He later told his guardian that he had been an alcoholic for 25 years and that it had hurt his family. On the podcast Bullseye with Jesse Thorne, he talked about those years and said he didn't even know he had a problem because he drank so much at home. Smoking too much was another problem. At one point, he was smoking up to 3 packs of cigarettes a day. He called it the worst addiction and tried to quit for years without success. It wasn't until a doctor helped him quit that he finally got help. Showed him an x-ray of his lungs and pointed out the early signs of emphysema. That's when he decided to stop smoking for good. Dick has been open about how his addictions affected his mental health. He said he struggled with depression and even had suicidal thoughts. He finally got help through rehab and Alcoholics Anonymous, which was a turning point. He talked about how drinking stopped making him feel good and started making him sick, which is when he decided to quit. It wasn't easy, but he's been sober and he hasn't smoked in a long time, but the effects of his old habits are still there. He's had lung problems like pneumonia and a collapsed lung. Despite these problems, Dick Van DJK has used his story to inspire others by being open about his own. By doing this, he's made people who are struggling with addiction feel less alone. He's especially proud that He is honored that his story has touched so many lives by having a center in New York called after him. After 60 years in the Dick Van Dyke should be retired by now, but he's about to turn 100 years old and is still going strong, making appearances, acting, and in an interview with Today, Dick said he doesn't think he'll ever retire because it's too much fun. He told Larry King that getting older has been the best time of his life because he loves spending time with his wife and is thrilled that he can still sing and dance. His energy and happiness may be why he's still so young looking. In 2021, Dick was honored at the Kennedy Center Honors for his amazing career. His Mary Poppins co-star Julie Andrews gave him the award and said, "He seems to have found the secret to happiness. He's proof that age doesn't have to slow you down." Recently, Dick played a man with amnesia who doesn't know who he is on Days of Our Lives. It turns out he's the father of one of the main characters and they reunite on the show. He even did a tap dance with another actor, Bill. He was nominated for an Emmy for his role as Hayes, and at almost 100 years old, he broke the record for the oldest person ever nominated in that category. Last year, Dick appeared on Ed on the Masked Singer dressed as a gnome, but he was voted off first. When everyone found out it was him, he got a standing ovation, and Judge Nicole Scherzinger got so emotional that she started crying. Dick said he had never seen the show before being invited, but thought it looked like fun. He called it the weirdest thing he'd ever done, and he wowed the audience by singing a popular song. Dick thinks that staying in shape is important for his health, so he still works out 3 times a week, doing yoga, stretching, and using exercise machines to stay strong. He recently talked on a podcast about how important it is for him to stay active and how much he enjoys it. As his 100th birthday approaches in December, Dick Van DJK is planning a big party. He said his 99th birthday was low-key, so he's going all out for this one.